that's also great about community. You have a need, and the Lord is the one that can meet every need you have. But do you know how the Lord meets your need? Through another individual. And if you're not willing to, communicate and be around a community of people, you're missing out on the Lord providing that you're needing.
What is up, friends? Rob Sevilla here, and I'm back with a brand new Spitting Fire podcast for all of you today. And I'm with my man, Evangelist Chris Payne. Chris, will you say what's up to everyone just real quickly?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Listen, honored to be here, Rob. I appreciate you reaching out to me. Excited to see what the Lord will do today.
Absolutely, and I know you're going to spit some serious fire, but before we dive into that real quickly, why do we do this podcast? Because I live by this mantra that all of you watching or listening today are created on purpose for a purpose. And I can't think of any better year than to start living on purpose than here in 2022. And then secondly is I believe there's a divine creator that put a leader in all of you. And I pray that something that Chris and I talk about today will not just motivate you, but divinely inspire you to be that person that God has called you to be. So, Chris, I'm excited about this, man. I've been looking forward to this interview. And what I always like to do to kick our interviews off is to get a 30,000-foot view, whatever you feel comfortable sharing of your story. So do you mind taking us back a little bit and then maybe some of that transition time up to what you're doing today?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. And so I'll just, like I said, I'll give a rough 30,000-foot view of what I can. Long story short, I lived a lifestyle of addiction. Man, in and out of drugs, in and out of rehabs, in and out of jail. Matter of fact, I started using when I was 11 years old. Wow. And it's crazy. It's crazy to see that and say that because I got a son that just turned 12, and to think the world is not any better right now. It's a whole lot worse. And so, yeah, I grew up without a father. Didn't have a father, didn't know his name or anything. I had my mom and my grandmother. So at the very beginning, I grew up with a sense of rejection. I'm glad, and I like what you said, that, purpose. We're all created on purpose for purpose. And from the very beginning, Rob, I didn't feel that purpose. I felt that rejection, felt all that. So throughout life, I sensed and tried to find purpose. And so that carried me on hanging out with older people. The three things, and I tell this in my story, so I'm transparent and vulnerable as well.
Yeah, I want you to be.
I believe it helps people to see the wounds and the hurts. But anyways, the three things I said I would never do as I was in my addiction throughout my teenage years, I said I would never smoke crack, I'd never shoot up, and I'd never steal from my family. Well, Rob, I ended up doing all three of those before I turned 18. And so I tell individuals as I'm talking to them, listen, to be careful to say I'll never do that, because be careful that you stand lest you fall. And so ended up going that route, in and out of jails and rehabs, went to 7 different rehabs. And this is my story, so this is how I tell it as well. The first 6 of them were all secular-based rehabs. Not knocking them, not saying anything, because they work for individuals, but I went through all of them, and I would be clean for just a little bit and then fall right back off. And so finally, it was in 2013, after trying to commit suicide and lots of other different things, I wake up that morning, I get 2 phone calls. The first phone call was my boss man. He said, Chris, I know you stole my pills. I know what happened. Come and turn yourself in, or I'm calling law. And of course, where I was at that time, I told him, I've denied it and all that stuff, but I knew something was fixing to happen. Then I got a second phone call, and it was my mom had let me move back in her house at this time. I was 27 years old. And she said, Chris, today's the day. I'm done with you. When I get off of work, you better be out of my house. You better be, I don't care where you go, what you do, but I'm done with you. And so I was faced with those 2 phone calls. And I thank the Lord that my mom did that, Rob, because all throughout my addiction, and this is what I tell parents as well, all throughout my addiction, when my mom and my grandmother pulled me out, that's who I was running to, and they were enabling me and things like that. It wasn't until they were able to show me that tough love that when I hit my bottom, I had nowhere else to turn but to look up to the one who could truly help me overcome that addiction. And so that was that day. And so I got on the phone call. I talked to a lady named Dodie Bell. Several people around the Tupelo surrounding area knows her. She was actually the lady that would help me get into rehabs, and she knew my story and everything. Well, I called her this specific day, and I said, hey, listen, I need to do something. I need to get out of here. I got to go. I'm struggling, this and that. She said, yeah, you need to do something different. I said, that's what everybody's telling me. What do I need to do? And she said, well, you've tried every rehab around here, Chris. You need to try a faith-based program. And so little did she know what she was doing, and I didn't know. But basically, in a nutshell, she was saying, you need to try Jesus. You know, you've done everything else, and it wasn't working. And so she told me about this place called the Russellville Dream Center, and it was there. I called them, got on the phone with them, told them what was going on. It was about 3:30. They said, yeah, we can go ahead and take you. I said, okay, when do I need to be there? They said, be here today at 6:30. And then I started backtracking. I'm like, whoa, hold up now. Today? I can't come today. I need to do this, 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 and this. And they said, no, if you want help, you need to come today. And I thank God for it today, because tomorrow couldn't have came, no telling what could have happened. And so, that's why another verse, he says, today is the day of salvation, because for so many times it's like, well, I'll wait till tomorrow. I'll wait till we never know what's next. And so I went that day. My mom dropped me off, and she told them, they said, if he decides to leave, don't call me. He's here on his own. It was all the way in Alabama. And I went in on March 4th, 2013. It was a 6-month program, and I ended up staying 5.5 years. And
Wow.
and so that was from 2013 to 2018. That was my foundation. That was my life. I got me an apartment down there. I surrendered my life to Christ on March 10th, 2013. Surrendered to ministry. Became student pastor, associate pastor over outreach, admin director, and things like that. And slowly through that process, I had lost custody of my kids, and so I gained full custody of my son. He came to live with me, and so did all that. And I was not, and I'll tell you this, and this is something that kind of goes into my story as well. You talk about purpose. I tell a lot of people this right now, because where I'm at right now, if you was to ask me a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whether you asked me or told me, like, hey, Chris, this is what you're going to be doing, I'm like, I don't believe it, because I couldn't see it. And Ephesians 3:20 tells us this. It says, now him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly, more than you can ever ask or even imagine, according to the power that's at work within us. And so if you would have asked me, Chris, where do you see yourself at in a couple of years? Whatever I would have said, Rob, guess what? I would have sold myself short. Because the Lord is saying, you know what? It's more than you can imagine. And so I wasn't planning on coming back to Tupelo. I set roots in Russellville, Alabama. That's where my life was going to be at. I cut ties with everybody here besides my family, because every time I'd come back around here, I'd fall back off, because everybody around Tupelo knew me, but they knew me as the old Chris Payne, the junkie, the crackhead, how I used to live. And so I cut ties with everybody. I ran back. And then in 2018, is at the beginning of the year, I was kind of just doing some soul searching and seeking the Lord on, like, okay, what's this year look like? And I remember him kind of just speaking to me saying, today, this is the year everything's going to be new. It's going to be a new year. And I didn't know exactly what all that meant. And then on April 4th, 2018, I was in a Sunday morning worship service. And as I was sitting there in worship, I felt strongly the Lord tugging on me and speaking to me, saying, I want you back in Tupelo. I got people in Tupelo I want you to reach. And that was, I tell you, Rob, that was a scary feeling, because I had nothing in Tupelo. I had everything was in Russellville, Alabama, where I had surrendered everything. And here I felt the Lord calling me back to Tupelo. And so through that, through wisdom, counsel, wise counsel, and just seeking the Lord in prayer, I seen that the Lord was truly calling me back to Tupelo. I decided to start making those steps. And in that, as I was doing some studying, I was reminded of in Joshua chapter 3, I think it is, because I'm seeking the Lord. Okay, what does it look like? I don't have a house. I don't have a job. I have nothing there. Like, why would you call me back out to there? And then in Joshua 3, he talks about where he tells the priest to cross over the Jordan with the ark. And he says, I'll split the water. He says, but not until you get into the water. The water will come up to your ankles or your knees, and then I'll split the water. And see, that's what the Lord was speaking to me. He said, Chris, quit waiting on me to split the water. I need you to step out in faith, and then you'll see the water splitting. And so that's what I did. I just took a step of faith, came out, and through that, the Lord has shown himself faithful. Now that I'm back here in Tupelo, came back in 2018. I met my wife at Anchor Church, connected with them there, and then in 2018, a Way Out ministry birthed, and I'll tell you more about that later on. Through that, I had started working doing construction. Did that for about 2 years, and currently right now I'm considered full-time ministry. Just going around, just wherever the Lord leads in areas, preaching, speaking, meeting with people. But also a big part of our ministry right now is My Brother's Cup Coffee, as you know about. But that's one of the main things that I'm doing right now, and so that's kind of where I'm at, and the 30,000 foot view of everything. And I can go into more on like a Way Out, My Brother's Cup, and how all that came about, but that's just kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, man. I mean, there's so many things we could dissect there in that intro. But one interesting thing to me, when you said the number 7, it was your 7th rehab. And as you know, the 7 is the number of perfection. I just find that very interesting. Some people would say a coincidence. I think it's greater than that. But it's interesting that you had to go through those 6 to get to the 7th. And the 7th was, so talk about that for a second. I know you've thought about that.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that is, I mean, because we can look back over our life and wonder why. I listen to a pastor, Pastor Robert Morris, a lot of times. I've heard from Gateway Church, and he just got done doing a message, passing the purpose test, and he said one thing. He said, "Will the Lord show you the steps on what you're supposed to take? Yes. Will you know what to take? Yes." And then the next question we ask ourselves: when will you know that it's the right step to take? And then, or this was part of your purpose, or it's for purpose, or whatever. And he said, after you've already taken the step.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, see, we take those steps, and then we can look back over our life, and we can see how the Lord used that as a purpose part to work things out in our lives. And through those 6 different rehabs leading up to that 7th one, and that's why I don't knock secular programs or anything, because like I remember the very first rehab I went to, I turned 21 in it. It was at the Haven House in Oxford, Mississippi. And it was there that I remember I went. I tell people like this: I went because I had back problems. Like, what do you mean, Chris? You had back problems? I had my family and the law on my back. I just went to get them off my back. I wasn't ready for anything. It's like, all right, get y'all off my back. I'm gonna go. And I tell you though, I went, and then seeds were planted. I started listening to people telling their story. I started seeing, some hope, and then I started realizing, like, wow, man, maybe I do have a problem. Man, maybe this is serious. Man, and all these other different things. And I remember telling my buddy on the phone, I turned 21 in there. I told him, I said, man, I do have a problem. I need to stop this stuff. And I said, so when I get out of here, man, we're not going to be doing that anymore. But man, me and you going to go to the bowling alley and we're going to get drunk. And so I went from trying to justify or, swap one thing for another. And I'm not knocking anybody that does alcohol or anything like that. I'm just saying I can't, because, and I would just use one for the other. Well, through those 6 different rehabs, I tell people this: I learned what not to do, because a lot of people tell me, don't do that. Don't do that. Well, we're hard-headed enough to think, well, it ain't going to happen to me. Maybe I can do it like that. And, through God's grace, thankfully, I didn't die in the midst of all that. He allowed me to understand, what not to do to better help somebody else as well and give them a better understanding. And then I had this lady speak into my life. You may know of her, Kay Falkenberry. She used to own Kay's Creation. And she would come and teach classes at the Dream Center. She said, Chris, I see you as being like David. I said, what do you mean? She said, David, when things would go on in David's life, he would always run. He would run into a cave and kind of hide out in a cave. But as he was running and hiding out in those caves, the Lord was chipping off on him little by little at each cave he ran to, until he became the mighty warrior God called him to be. And he said, I see over your life going to all these different rehabs and just kind of running here and there. You wasn't running from, you thought you was running from God, but the Lord was actually chipping off on you each part of the way to bring you to where you're at now. And I can look back over my life and see that the Lord used all that. And I believe, like you said, on the 7th one, it was completion. It was like, we're fine. This is it. This is it. And that was finally when this is when it changed. When I went in there to the Russellville Dream Center, I don't tell people like, hey, Jesus showed himself to me himself. No, what happened is I seen it in somebody else. And when I
Hmm.
seen it in somebody else, Rob, I said, man, I want what they got. Man, all my life I had been searching for purpose. I'd been searching for acceptance. I've been
Sure.
searching for something to fill that void. And the drugs and alcohol for sure didn't do it. Well, if I get the right family, that'll do it. If I get married and have kids, if you ain't ready for that, it's going to do nothing but cause more chaos. If I get the right job, or if I have enough money, all these if onlys, and I would fill that void with all those things, and it worked for a moment, but in the end, it'd leave me empty. And I would always run back to the thing that would comfort me, and that would be my drugs and alcohol and that lifestyle. But it's when I seen some freedom and some passion and some purpose in somebody else, I said, man, I want what they got. And so what it done, it stirred up a hunger and a thirst for righteousness on the inside of me, and it caused me to not want to chase the man, come on now, but chase the God of the man. And so the Lord just used all that along the way.
No, I love what you're saying. And if you're watching or listening to this today, and of course, when this drops, I want you to hear something, what Chris is saying. You have this divine creator who can change your story or change your life to change other lives.
Mm.
This is what Chris is talking about. He went to this seventh addiction faith-based center here, and he saw a changed life, and it changed his life. So my question to you, whether you're watching or listening to this today, is will you allow your divine creator to change your life so you can change other lives? Yeah, that's a very sobering question to ask. And I love what you're saying, Chris. Let me ask you this, because I know you said, when you got there, Jesus just didn't speak to you right out of the gate. If you're comfortable talking about this, is there a moment at the Dream Center in those 5 to 6 years you were there? Was there a defining moment that you go, I know God just met with me and it gave me the power to say no to that and yes to him fully? Was there a moment or a few moments maybe that kind of rise to the top?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely several moments. We don't have time to talk about all the moments. I mean, the first moment that's the most detrimental in anybody's life was on March 10th, 2013. It was, I came in on the 4th, and then on the 10th, that was a Sunday. And I remember I was in room 6, and I was on the top bunk, and it was almost lights out. It was almost time for lights out. And I remember just hearing, about, giving your life to the Lord and things like that. And see, I didn't have a preacher like over me saying all these different things, but I remembered hearing if I confess with my mouth and believe in my heart that Christ died for me, that, he would come in and he'd save me. And at that moment, I said, God, I can't do this no more. God, I believe in you. God, help me, And I truly believe that was the moment that things started changing. Now, did I wake up the next morning like everything? No, Thank God that it's not based on a feeling. It's based
Yeah,
on a truth and a knowing. Because there
that's
was
it.
many times that I didn't feel saved. There was many times because individuals think like, okay, once I accept Christ, that everything else is going to change. No, you're probably still going to think about getting high. You're probably still going to think about all those lustful thoughts, all those worldly things, because that's what you've grown up around. But what you have now is something greater on the inside of you that can reveal things. I tell people this all the time. And let's say an individual is struggling with this and that. How can you help them not keep doing that? Or how can you take the bad from them? I put in an analogy like this. Let's say you got a dog. A dog has a bone. And you want to get that bone from that dog. Guess what, Rob? You're not going to go over there and just take that bone from that dog, because what's that dog going to do? Probably attack you. So
Sure.
how can you get that bone out of that dog's mouth? Well, you present a steak to it. And when that dog sees that steak, come on now, he'll want to drop that bone and run to that steak over there. And so as I'm doing that, I'm seeing the goodness of God. And I'm starting to taste it throughout life, whether it be like answered prayers that I was praying, or whether it was one of my roommates at the time or another guy that was at the program. He just lost his father, and here he is still being able to walk this thing out with faith and different things. And the Lord was speaking to me through that. I remember another time I was in, we would have classes, and one of the class, the teacher would come in and, go over their message and stuff, and at the end asked if anybody wanted prayer. Well, at this specific time, I'd just been struggling with things in my mind and just other different things that we struggle with at times. And at the end of it, he said, "Okay, so does anybody need prayer?" And I stood up and I said, "I do." He said, "Okay, y'all come up here to the front." And so I went up there to the front, and I'm holding my hands up, expecting him to kind of pray over me and pray for me. And as I'm doing that, he looks at me. He says, "Hold on, I'm not supposed to pray for you. You're supposed to." He said, "You're supposed to pray." I'm like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, just start praying." And at that point in time, it was the first time I really remember just kind of just praying and declaring things over my life, and thanking the Lord for his goodness, all this other stuff. And I felt this overwhelming sense of his presence just come over me. And for me, I'm not saying this is everybody or anything. And I fell out, what I would call fell out in the spirit. I just, I laid there, and it was something overwhelming come over me. And I know without a shadow of doubt that was the Lord just revealing himself, a touch from the Lord, and many, many other different things through confirmations, through church services, just through other people speaking into my life, not knowing anything about me. And it's just like, oh, wow, and it's just, my faith just over time generated and grew. And, but there was a time I went in 2013, but I tell you this, it wasn't until 2015 that I made a promise to the Lord, okay, I'm never going back. Because for those first 2 years, I was like, what if? What if I do this? Or what if this happens? All these other different things. And then I remember I think it was August 12th, 2015, I made a promise and said, "Lord, I'm putting my hand on the plow and I'm not looking back." And so I'm saying that to anybody that's listening that's ever struggled with anything. Well, I still have those desires. Well, I still have this. Don't give up. Don't give in. Keep going forward. Yeah, so I mean, just for anybody else, don't give up, don't give in, because the fact of the matter is the enemy desires you to go ahead and give up and give in, but he is actually, the Lord is doing something greater on the inside of you. Yes, and don't give up and don't quit, because that's, because it may not happen overnight, and it may not happen when you want it, how you want it. Though a righteous man falls 7 times, he gets back up. Uh, I There's one thing that I tell, an analogy that I tell a lot of people. Outside my house, I got a mow, and then I've got this big ditch line, long ditch line. It's
Sure.
very high, and I have to, so I got a weed eater. Just to be honest with you, Rob, I don't like weed eating.
Yeah.
Uh,
I don't either.
last thing I want to do is get out there and weed eat it. And so there's those times I got to get out there and I start on it, and man, I'm about 45 minutes to an hour into it, and I look in front of me and I see, like, man, I still got so much farther to go. When I look in front of me, sometimes when I'm weed eating that ditch line, I feel like I haven't went that far. Like, wow, I still got all that left. And then I look behind me as I'm weed eating, and I realize at this time I've already made it over halfway. Like, wow, I made it a whole lot further than I was expecting, than I was believing. And then what that done was that motivated me to continue to move forward a little bit more. So sometimes what we need to do is we just need to stop, look behind us, see how far we've come, and then that motivates us to go a little bit further.
Yeah. No, I love what you're saying there, because I say this a lot of times when I'm talking with people, and even when I'm preaching to myself, which we should be doing daily, is a lot of times we don't realize that we're a lot closer to breakthrough than we really realize. Sometimes we think we're so far away. And I believe one of the greatest strategies of our greatest adversary, the devil, Satan, is to make us think we're farther away from where God really wants us. And not that we've arrived, that's not what I'm saying, but I think a lot of times he uses that to discourage us. And like what you're saying, take a look back and go, hey, I'm not where I want to be, but thank God I'm not that person I was 5 years ago, a year ago, or even 90 days ago. So I definitely love what you're saying there. Is that where this ministry you talked about, a No Way Out, was birthed? Was that to let people know they have a way out?
Yeah, well, not no way out, a way out.
A
And
way out, excuse me. Yeah, sorry.
reason for that is, so in 2017, I had a friend that I grew up with. I mean, me and him grew up next door to each other, used to run together. He ended up done the same thing. He ended up going to prison, in and out of prison, things like that. So anyways, in 2017, his mother reached out to me and said he recently passed away. He got shot and killed and part of his
Mm.
addiction. And so she asked me, she said, Chris, would you preach his funeral? And
Yeah.
I said, I'd be honored to. But at this time, I didn't know what in the world I was fixing to say. I'm living in
Mm.
Russellville, Alabama. The funeral's in Tupelo, Mississippi. And so, mind you, all the people that's going to be at that funeral are those people that we used to run with, are the people that are still in addiction, struggling, living
Mm.
that lifestyle. And matter of fact, a bunch of the individuals that was there was high and like, kind of nodding out. All that's like, I mean, that's the crowd that was going to be around there. And so I'm asking the Lord, what can I say? What do I need to tell them? Well, last time they seen Chris and heard about Chris, they heard the old man Chris. They didn't know I'd changed my life. They didn't know that I'd done things differently. They thought I was still doing the same thing that I've always done. And so they knew nothing about that. And so the Lord kind of prompted me to let them know that there's a way out. And it comes from 1 Corinthians 10:13. It says, there's no temptation that has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. In other words, the struggles you're going through, the life issues you find yourselves facing at times, you're not the only one. To take
Mm.
hope in that because others are going through the same thing. And not only
Sure.
that, but others have overcame it as well. And guess what? If they can, you can too. And he says, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. In other words, we can't say the devil made us do it. He's not going to place
Yeah.
so much on us that we have to sin, that we have to go back. We don't have to. He says, and on the very last part of that scripture, he says this. He says, and when you are tempted, not if, because Rob, this world will try to tempt us in every shape, form, or fashion. Doesn't
Yep.
matter if you do drugs or alcohol, but just with worldly things, this world will try to tempt us. And it says, and when you are tempted, he'll provide a way out so that you can endure it. And so I went to that service that morning or that afternoon, and like I said, nobody knew anything about me. When they seen me come in there, they knew that something had changed, and I was able not to speak from a standpoint of something I read about, or talked about or anything, but myself lived. They knew the rough individual I used to be. See, y'all are seeing who I am now by, made new through Christ, but you don't understand I don't glorify this stuff, but I sometimes want people to understand, like, even my son, I have full custody of my son. When he was a year old, like, I was so far out there that, I was doing dope and stuff. And I remember his mom found my pipe that I was using, and she came and she said, Chris, she had my son 1 year old in one arm and the pipe in the other hand. She said, Chris, which one are you going to choose? You going to choose your son, or you going to choose this stuff? And through my
Mm.
messed up mind and the addiction I was at, I chose that stuff and I walked out. But by the grace of God, today I have full custody of him. He can work all things out for the good for those who are loved and called according to his purpose. And so, that's the heart and the motivation behind a way out, is letting individuals. And it's not so much that they don't want out of that. They just don't know anything else. That was me. They say it all the time, Rob. They say, you got to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. Brother, I was
Sure.
sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was tired of throwing my life away. I was tired of all those other different things, but I just didn't have any hope and knew anything else. It talks about it. It says, hope deferred makes a heart sick. And so if I can come about through a way out, present some hope, my hope and my desire is to possibly give you a glimpse of something greater than you see right now in your life. And it stir up a hunger and a
Mm.
thirst within you to want to chase after that. And so
Yeah.
that's where the message started in 2017. And then in 2018, when I moved back here, the Lord prompted me to do an outreach, like a big around,
Mm.
no, it was in 2019, a big like revival outreach and thing like that. And so that started in 2019. And from there, it's just kind of grown to where we do yearly events, go around doing revivals. I go around preaching, speaking, whether I go to the jails, rehabs, different churches, or more than that, weekly I'll meet with individuals one-on-one. I have people reach out to me that they either themselves are struggling or they know somebody that's struggling with addiction. I can meet with them, talk with them, encourage them. even more than that, there's a lot of people that want help, but they don't know that there's help available, for
Sure.
them. And so a way out also has just a back pocket full of resources, can connect you to I picture it like this, we're not the answer, but we're a hub. Let's say you're struggling or
Sure.
somebody that's struggling, like, hey, reach out to Chris Payne and his wife or reach out to A Way Out. They may be able to help you. And then they reach out to us and I'm able to connect them to the right place or the right person to help fill that need. And I heard it said like this: find a need and fill it, find a hurt and heal it. And
Sure.
there's just, that's kind of the heart of A Way Out, and just open to do many different things, however the Lord leads, whatever we
Sure.
can do to help an individual find that way out.
Sure. No, and you can definitely tell that you're very passionate about it, that you can feel the passion, the energy even translate to the camera because you've been there. And, my story is very messy too. I won't get into that, but I had to give that to God. Like you said, right? That I was not going to let the mess of yesterday keep me from the mission that God has for me today. But somebody's listening or watching this, Chris, because you know this. A lot of people that have royally failed in life, blew it, screwed up, whatever terminology you want to use there. A lot of them, this, even before they come to God or find that healing in God, in a relationship with God. A lot of them, the enemy's telling them, oh, you got to get your act together, or, God doesn't want anything to do with you. Look how much you've messed up. And even your own friends and family don't want to be around you. Maybe speak to someone right now who wants that way out, that wants to find that hope, that wants to find that answer, but all of that's coming up and replaying in their mind. Can you speak to that individual real quickly?
Yeah, of course. That's that was a big thing for me as well. Church and Christian and this whole Jesus thing was the last house on the block for me. I didn't grow up in church or anything because I wasn't good enough. I had a past of failure. Not even only that, but even let's say I wanted to get clean and sober, I still had desires that I was holding on to that I knew wasn't right. And so
Sure.
why would I don't want to be a hypocrite, come there
Yeah.
and have all this change and all this stuff. Well, here's the fact of the matter, Rob. That will never change until I came to it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people think like, well, I've got to get this situated or that figured out before I come to him, and then no, the Lord says you won't ever want to change that until you come to me. He says, because once you delight yourself into the Lord, then he'll give you the desires of your heart. Why? Because your desires start changing. I say it like
Sure.
this a lot of times. The scripture, Revelations 3:20. It says, now behold, I stand at the door and knock. And if any man hear me and let me in, I'll sit down and sup with him. Or I'll sit down
Mm.
and have a fellowship meal with him. Okay? See, a lot of times we feel that tugging. A lot of times we feel that knocking, but we won't. And I'm not even talking about, that you've never been saved or you got to be saved. Even Christians still feel tuggings and knockings on their hearts in certain areas of their heart that the Lord says, I want to come into that area. But anyways, now, a lot of times we don't want to open our hearts up to that is because we're afraid the Lord's going to come in and point out everything. You're doing this wrong. You're doing that wrong. I
Right.
can't believe you're still struggling with that. Come on now. You should be
Sure.
past that. Because here's the thing about it. See, the world looks at us that way, but see, the Lord doesn't. He says that the man looks at on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And this is my own revelation of it. See, the world was looking at me as a junkie crack, all these other different things of failure, rejection, all this other different stuff. They were seeing the sin that I was doing, and they were rejecting me because of that. See, the Lord wasn't looking at me at the sin I was doing. He was looking at my heart. He knew that, man, I had some hurts. He knew I had some failures and some rejections in my heart. And he said, Chris, if I could get to that area, then the rest would work out. I'm not worried about you
Mm.
going and messing up. He said, because that's not the problem. That's just a fruit from the problem. There's a root issue. He says, I want to get to that hurt. I want to get to that wound. And it's just like I said. He says, if any man open up the door and let me in, I'll come in and sup with him, have a meal with him. So I'm going to put in an analogy, let's say with me and you, and this is just me just speaking it, but
Sure.
let's say I just met you for the very first time. I know you now, so it'd be different. But let's
Sure.
say I just met you, don't even know anything about you, but I just met you out on the
Sure.
streets. and you wanted to hang out and you wanted to, have a meal or something. I say, okay. And I invited you over to my house. You know what I'm not going to do? I'm going to have my kitchen cleaned up. And I'm going to have you, and I'm going to bring you into my kitchen and sit down at my kitchen table. We're going to have a meal. What I'm not going to do, Rob, is I'm not going to bring you in my back bedroom. I'm not going to bring you in my son's room, all these other, because there's some dirty messes back there, And so I don't know you enough to do that. And see, the Lord is saying that in this scripture as well. He says, I'm not trying to get to all those dirty messes right now. He says, all I want to do is come in, sit down, and have a fellowship meal with you. And Rob, bringing you in my house, I sit down and have a meal with you. And I start getting to know you. Come on now. And you get to know me. I realize that you're not judging me. I realize that you accept me and you love me for who I am and not how the world looks at me. And I've built this relationship up with you. It may take a day. It may take 2 years. I don't know. But it's taken this time. And I've built this confidence in my brother that you're not going to leave me nor forsake me no matter what I show you. And at that point in time, I'm like, hey, Rob, I'm struggling with this back here. Man, there's something, and I got a feeling you can help me with this. Will you come back here and look at it with me? And that's what the Lord wants to do. He's not worried about all
Sure.
the bad things you're doing right now. He just wants to sit down and
Yeah.
fellowship with you and have that meal with you. And Psalms
Yeah.
tells us this. It says, taste and see that the Lord is good. See, a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth towards the Lord because of church, because of even Christians, because of the world, all these other different things. And the Lord says, I need you to come and taste me. It's like if you was to call me and you were like, Chris, hey, man, I got this steak that I've been marinating all week long. I want you to come and try it. Man, this is going to be the best steak you have ever tasted. There's going to be a part of me like, no, probably not. I've got a bunch of good steaks that I've tasted. I can't. And then you're going to say, no, come and taste and see if it's good yourself. And then I come to your house and I sit down and I take a taste of that steak that you cooked. And then I realized, like, wow, man, now this is I have not had a steak. This is the best tasting steak I've ever had. And then at that point in time, I've tasted and seen that it's good. No matter what somebody else tells me, oh, it won't work. Oh, it's no good. You can't tell me it won't because I've tasted and seen that it is good.
Yeah, no, I definitely love that a lot of times people are led to believe that God is in love with some future version of you. Right? If I'm the Christian who reads the Bible 2 hours a day and prays for this, I'm that poster child image Christian. And the reality is God loves you right now.
Yeah.
That he's not after your behavior, as Chris is saying, but he's after your heart, because he knows if he gets your heart, the behavior will begin to change. So I definitely love that, man, that you're using your story to your changed life to change lives, and God is using you for that. So let's talk about leadership, because this is a leadership podcast,
Yes.
right? Give me a leadership habit, leadership principle that you've learned throughout this journey that you've instilled or you've cultivated in your own life, and that you live from, but that you lead others from as well. Is there one of those habits that rises at the top that goes, this is a non-negotiable in my life? This has to happen.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, before I start my day, I'll come where I'm at right now and I'll spend my time, with the Lord, whether I'm studying, reading, praying, doing anything of that matter. It was actually it was some things that was instilled in me when I was at the Dream Center, some great habits, and I kept moving with it. Like I didn't stop doing it. A lot of times people will be in seasons and learn these great habits that truly help change their lives, but when they
Sure.
change the scenery, they also change the habit as well. And a lot of times we need to keep what was helping us in our last season throughout the season. So first and foremost is sitting down, starting my day off through prayer, in the Word, and just kind of seeking the Lord first. And then more than that, something else that's been on my heart a lot is passing the mantle, in a sense that we need to we need to have older individuals. And for my sake, let's say you work in the business world, well, then you want older individuals that's been there before, pour into
Yeah.
you. But for my sake, let's say older men in the faith, I need to I've got people close to me that's been passing away, that's older men in the faith, and I feel like the Lord is allowing that, like, it's time to pass that on to the next generation. So I find leaders that's gone before me, that's kind of walked this life out, and I humble myself enough to allow them to pour into me, to allow them to speak life into me, to allow them to hold me accountable. You know,
Mm,
because we need that. We need older generation. If you're watching this and you've got people under you, take time to pour into them because they
sure.
need that. And younger generation that's listening to this, humble yourselves enough and keep our mouths shut to say because our worst thing that we can do is try to say that we have it figured out. We don't. You know, we need people to continue to pour into us and hold us accountable. And and then there was something else wise that a businessman told me, a faith-filled businessman. He said, Chris, he said, the greatest thing that you're going to have is this right here. And he held up his phone. He said, the greatest, most valuable thing you're going to have. And he held up his phone. I said, what do you mean, my phone? I said, man, my phone can be one of my biggest distractions if I'm not careful.
Sure.
He said, no. He said, what's so good about it? And he opened up his contact list and he started scrolling through. He said, this right here. He said, a network. And he said, because what's so great about a network is, let's say you're in this stage of your life, you're struggling or need help with it, or whatever the case may be. Let's say your car is broke down on the side of the road. Well, you can call right there Dan, your mechanic, and he can help you out, give you some advice. Or let's say you're struggling financial issues. Well, you got Sarah that she's over at the bank. Your network is great. And so right now, where the Lord's got me at as well is He's broadened my horizon and getting me in uncomfortable areas to bring me kingdom connections, if that makes sense, because
Sure.
it's all about relationship. First and foremost, this relationship here, but the Lord created us for this relationship here, because there's going to be something that Rob can help me out with, that I'm going to need him in my corner, that I can reach out to him. So just because, that's one thing that we need to also understand is we're all in this thing together. We may not all approach things the same way, but we all have something to bring to the table.
Sure. So one thing I've heard you say a lot through this interview today is a lot about the power of community. You've said it in different ways about that circle, how important that circle is, how important that community is. Talk about that for a second, because I believe a lot of people can't break through, whether it's addiction or maybe even something less than that, because the circle that they're still in is calibrating them down instead of up, right? Towards a breakthrough. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I mean, and that's what it's about. Like I said, I mean, from the very beginning, when life finally changed with me, it was through community. It was when I seen something in somebody else. And if I won't be willing to be around somebody to see something, then I won't never grab that vision, and then along the way, we had community that, held me accountable for sure, but also just to sharpen me, to pour into me, to, um, this is like, you don't want to hit a ceiling, if so to speak, because we can get so far. Because not saying anything
Mm-hmm.
about the people around us, but people around us can only bring us so far. And if we're not
Sure.
willing to broaden that horizon and broaden that community, because it's going to bring us into a higher ceiling when we get around other individuals. Um,
Sure.
you know, we have. Here's the thing that's also great about community. You have a need. And the Lord is the one that can meet every need you have. But do you know how the Lord meets your need? Through
Yeah.
another individual. And, and,
Sure.
and if you're not willing to, communicate and be around a community of people, you're missing out on the Lord providing that you're needing. And another good thing about community is like this right here. Everybody looking at this, you see this right here. You can tell me all day long, Chris, there is nothing on that cup. And you're looking at it, there's not, and
Right.
to your perspective, there's not. And you could, I put $100 on it. There's nothing on the cup. I know that there's nothing on that cup. And then hear me, the community on the other side, like, no, Chris, there is something, and sometimes we need that different perspective that sees it from the other side to let you know there is something on it, because we can see one point of view. and we can look at it and we can feel like this is how it is. That's how it's always going to be. That's why wise counsel is great to have and just community
Sure.
like that, because I can be stuck on seeing something one way, but sometimes I need somebody else in the community to help and to help bring me a different perspective. And then you said you feel like the Lord has given the divine creator, the Lord has given us all leadership, or basically like entrepreneurship in a sense, and he has. It talks about it in Matthew 25 where he says the parable of the talents. He's given everybody each according to their ability, and the reason, whether it be 1, 2, or 5, he's given you whatever resources he has because he wants you to invest in it, to multiply it to greater. And sometimes the only way that you're going to invest in that, just like the one person that didn't invest it, he didn't have a community. He buried it. He isolated. He kept it to himself. But then the other ones invested it and used it in their community. There's things that you have that others need, and the Lord has blessed you with to be able to pour into somebody else. We got to have each other to do this thing.
Yeah, no, I love it. Definitely spitting some serious fire, man. And I always ask people that come on the podcast this, if there was one word you would use to describe yourself, what would that one word be?
Um, it's hard to, um, I, I don't know. It's hard to say just one single word,
Just
to be
give us a
honest.
phrase.
Just a, Ephesians 3:20. Now him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly more than you can ever ask, think, or even imagine, according to the power that's at work within you. I believe
Sure.
there's more. That's all I got to say is there's more. We
Yeah,
settle for just what's in front of us and this and that, but man, there is more to life, and there's more. And
sure.
it
And
gives.
why do you think we settle though, Chris? Like we serve this great God and we talk about this big God, and a lot of people sing about him and preach about him, but why do you think we live below that?
Um, because we don't see it. We don't,
Yeah,
we just see what's in front of us. We don't believe that there's more. It's we sell ourselves short. We're afraid at times to take risks.
yeah,
We're afraid of, the fear of the unknown, the fear of rejection, the fear of failure,
sure,
just a lot of different things like that. This is what I
sure.
ask a lot of people, right? Sometimes, to say, if the Lord was in front of you right now and says, whatever it is that you desire to do, you'll be successful at it, that
Hmm.
you will be successful at it, then what is it that you would do? See, there's a lot of times we're afraid that this might not be the right move, and this may not be the right move.
Mm,
And we paralyze ourselves. And see, in Hebrews 11:6, it says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. I don't think it's so much that you've got to make this certain step or you won't please me. The Lord is just like, at least take a step of faith. That's all. Whether it's the right step or it's the wrong step,
sure,
at least you're taking a step of faith. You're believing that something greater than yourself is going to help you out with this, and that being the Lord.
sure.
Don't be afraid to take a step of faith, whatever that is.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because that's been a topic that's come up a lot in different podcasts and different people that I've sat down with. And I even did a video on this recently about, I believe many Christians use prayer as an excuse to not execute, right? Not that prayer is bad, not that we shouldn't pray, but
Yeah.
how many times they go, I'm just going to pray about it, I'm going to pray about it. And 20 years later, they're still praying about it. And that opportunity that God put in front of them, they miss it. Or like what you said, it's like we want God to give us the whole blueprint, and you can read throughout the Bible, even people that we're in community with, that a lot of times it's just God gives you that next step in front of you, because true faith is not having all the blueprint and then stepping. True faith is going, I serve this big God, and whether I miss it or not, I'm going to fail forward by the grace of God.
Exactly. And that,
Yeah,
and I heard a wise man say it like this, God opens up doors, and that's what he does. He's a God that can open up doors no man can shut doors no man can open. But we think all the doors that God's going to open is like that door at Walmart. When you walk up to it, it's just going to
yep,
automatically open. No,
yep,
some of them doors are locked. Come on now. And sometimes he
yep,
gives you a key that you need to do something to unlock that door, to open up that door. Quit going up
sure,
to the door and acting like it's supposed to already open. When you possess the key, use the key. What is that key?
Sure.
Seek the Lord on that. But the Lord spoke to somebody letting you know that you've got a key. You just hadn't been afraid. You've been afraid to use it.
Sure. Well, as we get ready to wrap up today, two more things real quickly, if I may. Number one is where can we find you online? Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube?
Yeah, I'm mainly on Facebook. That's my main thing. My wife, she has Instagram and stuff, Kayla Payne, but mainly on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll definitely put those links down in the description when this drops. So as we close today, is there something that you go, man, I need to share this? Maybe there's God's impressed something in your heart that you go, I need to share this with the audience today, whether they're listening or watching this, before we get off, that you go, this interview won't be complete until I share this. Is there just something just kind of boiling over in you?
See, when we have hope, hope is the gas. I say it like this: hope is the gas in our car in this life that we have. We don't have
Sure.
hope, we don't have anything. But it's not it's not us not having hope, it's misplaced hope a lot of times. Because let's say my hope is in this situation, or in this person, or in this job, or in this identity, or something like that. When I place all my hope in that certain basket, and if that situation doesn't turn out the way I thought it should have turned out, guess what I lost?
Sure.
I lost all my hope because it was all in that basket. But when my hope is in the one who is over that situation, who has created that situation, then I don't lose hope. Uh, you know, uh, Continue to pray for those who just lost their jobs through United right now. That was, wow, I can't believe that just happened. But here, that's a prime example. If all your hope and identity was in that job at United, you lost all your hope and your identity. But if your hope is in that one that's over all that, there's something greater on the inside of you says, you know what, it's going to be okay. You know what, there is going to be something. It's going to work out. And you still have hope to hold on to. Last thing, Scripture, Colossians 3:1-3. Since you have been raised to new life with Christ, set your sights on the realities of heaven, where Christ sits, in the place of honor at God's right hand. Think about the things of heaven, not the things on earth. For you died to this life, and your real life is hidden with Christ in God. A lot of times what I would do in life is I would try to put Christ in my life. Let's say this is Christ and this is Chris. I would put Christ in Chris, which you got to accept Christ, but it'd be a whole lot of Chris and a little bit of Christ. And it's
Right.
saying, this be Chris, this be Christ, and let me hide Chris in Christ. And so there's a whole lot of Christ and a little bit of Chris. Too many times we go and we make plans and we make purposes and this right here, and we try to add Christ to it. Let's not do that. Let's have Christ first, and then we'll add us to it. Because what you're doing, you may not feel purpose in that, because that might not be your purpose. The Lord might have you for something more. It says we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. Proverbs 19:21. You can make many plans, but the Lord's purpose that prevails. And so that's my hope for it today.
Yeah, no, man, you've definitely brought some serious fire today. And, I think what Chris is encouraging us today, and I know a lot of people that watch this or hear this are not faith-based, and that's okay. I think you can take away something from this today, but maybe your next step is searching out this God that Chris is talking about, right? Yielding your life, this tugging, that knocking that Chris was talking about earlier, you've been fighting. And maybe God sent you here as a divine appointment to say, now is the time just to wave the white flag of surrender. But here's the bottom line. Great addiction, great mess, great failure, great junk, great whatever, fill in the blank, is not greater than this great God, right? And so I definitely love what you're saying there, Chris, and thank you for coming on the podcast today. And as we close today, I just want to remind you guys that if this has ministered to you, if this has spoken to you, if this has put fresh wind in your sails, so to speak, please hit the subscribe button, turn the notification on there. That way you're notified every time we drop fresh content like this. Share this message. Maybe there's somebody you're thinking about right now who's going through this mess, this hard season. Maybe it's a season of addiction. Get them in contact with someone like Chris, and let his changed life be used to possibly change their life. But God bless you guys, and keep living on purpose.